Hello and welcome to the second of our Planning and Environment Team video podcasts. Again on the call today is myself, Catherine Jump, Tim Willis and David Mathias. Hello.
Hello.
The topic of this podcast is implementing planning permissions and what people's options are if you are running out of time to implement your planning permission. Say you've only got a couple of weeks left, you still have to do assessment work or try and get people on site, and you simply feel like you're running out of time. What are your options to try and keep the planning permission alive? There's three kind of things I'd like to cover with this. First really is the use of Section 96A. There's a traditional way of using Section 96A. First of all, maybe David, what is Section 96A?
Section 96A is a power within the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 that allows you to make non-material amendments to planning permissions, which are at the discretion of the authority and in almost all cases, the officer dealing with the application. There's no hard and fast rule on what is non-material. So it's quite a flexible power that can be used and applied to varying elements of a planning consent that you've already got.
And in normal times, we sometimes use Section 96A in these circumstances where a permission is running out of time to get implemented to try and vary and tweak the wording of the conditions to limit what needs to be done from a pre-commencement point of view and make it simpler and more bite-sized to implement. So things like introducing phasing. Tim, that seems to work well in the normal world. Would it work here too?
Yeah, I think the potentially a non-material amendment is, as David says, completely in the discretion of the council. So if they decide to grant a non-material amendment, it's a matter of planning judgment for them. So everything is up for grabs in that sense. It depends on the attitude of individual councils ultimately as to whether the argument that you put forward and for use of that section will be permitted by them as a council. I know we faced that recently, haven't we, with various cases coming out on the use of Section 73 and 96A type arrangements and how you can actually overcome changes or modifications to planning descriptions and as opposed to planning conditions. So I think in theory, yes, I mean 96A is a wide power. You can in fact add some varied conditions under 96A as you can under Section 73. So in theory, at least, if the council's on your side and it's not an irrational decision, not an unlawful decision, you can do effectively what you like within those parameters.
And I guess it can be something that can be quite quick, can't it? Because there's no formal consultation process like Section 73 or a normal planning application. So even if you've only got, say, a fortnight, with speed and the goodwill of the LPA, you could get the issue resolved.
Yeah, I mean, it's a risk there, isn't there, ultimately, of potential somebody coming crying foul later. But, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a balance between losing your permission altogether and trying something which at least tries to give you a fighting chance of preserving that. And as I say, if anybody challenges 96A, it tends to be on the basis of irrationality or some unlawful attempt to use that power. But ultimately, the Fulford case, the Fulford Parish Council case last year, effectively said this is a matter of planning judgment for the council. And the court will be very reluctant to set aside that decision.
Yeah. The possible innovative way to use 96A is to actually extend the time to implement your planning permission or extend the time to submit your reserve matters. And I guess the legal theory goes there is currently we can't extend time conditions expressly under Section 73 because the Town and Country Planning Act says that we can't. But that prohibition only talks about Section 73 because I think, in fact, those provisions are older than Section 96A, which only came in later down the line. So at the moment, on the face of the Town and Country Planning Act, there's nothing to stop you trying to apply for extensions of time under 96A. Now, I guess we don't do that in normal times because you'd argue that any extension would be material. But do we think maybe now, where we are, an extension could be classed as non-material? What are your thoughts, David?
I think so. Yeah, every planning consent should have a time limiting condition attached to it. So you are going to find increasingly, the longer this lockdown goes on for, and the current situation remains, that people will be coming up to deadlines for implementation. They're going to be looking at that and thinking, I can't get contractors out on site to go to make sure that my consent is implemented. So this is a very, I think, appropriate application of Section 96A in the current circumstances. And you're right, given the unprecedented times that we are in at the moment, this is certainly, I think, an extension of time to allow for the passage of the crisis and for people to get back to a bit more of normality is not going to be material in planning terms.
The tension there, though, I suppose, is Section 73 definitely does say you can't extend time, and it's whether that you read the whole Act as you know, you have to read the whole Act as one piece of legislation, obviously, and whether there's then an inconsistency between the operation of Section 73 and 96A, isn't it? So that in itself, you'd have to overcome that as an argument, I suppose, in using 96A. But yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's a route.
I think if you're desperate, if you really are running out of time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, 96A, in terms of reserved matters, I think the Forford case was very clear on that, which is reserved matters is all part of the planning permission, and you can actually effectively put in amendments to reserved matters, and that might avoid the need for an extension of time for new reserved matters by just amending your existing reserved matters.
Yes. This is all interim because I think that we are hoping that we will see some new legislation that might take us back to the old 2008 position where you can formally apply for extensions of time. Tim, do you think we're going to see that in the next few weeks?
I think the government needs to look at that. I wonder, it has impacts, doesn't it? Because from a developer's point of view, that's great because they get a bit more time. From a local authority's point of view, particularly when there's cases involving viability appraisals, they will say, well, you know, all that's going to happen now is will we be faced with additional financial viability appraisals given the downturn in the market? So they will probably be more reluctant to want that to be extended. I can see, though, that there might be a limited time. It might be 6 months or 9 months after the government say it's all clear, we can all go out and do what we were doing before, to allow those permissions to be implemented. But there's always going to be, again, that tension between the pure number of unimplemented planning permissions that we have in the system anyway. What the government won't want is for that just to be used as an excuse not to implement for another 2 or 3 years, because they want to get on with things. They want the builders out there, the developers out there building things. But I can see viability being a bit of an issue around that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is whether the government could just give a blanket extension to all permissions for, say, a 6-month period, or whether we're just going to give the ability for individual applicants to apply to extend and that to be determined on their own merits. I guess it's still to be seen what the government's going to choose to do and at what time these kind of planning problems are going to come to the forefront of the government's list of to-dos.
Well, I suppose, I mean, it's a different league, I suppose, in the sense that what they've done with wages, salaries, and all that sort of thing, they've just made that blanket. I mean, they've obviously limited it in terms of the scope, but that they've not even attempted to go on an individual basis there, have they? They've just basically, this is what we're going to introduce, and that would make more sense, and it takes the pressure off local authorities as well, because they would be faced with a number of applications, probably hundreds or thousands of applications, wouldn't they? Which, with the resources as they are. Yeah, exactly. And that anything that slows down the system, I can see the government wanting to avoid.
Well, we will have to do a follow-on podcast on all of that when we know what the position is, but we've run out of time, so thank you very much for that both. As ever, if anyone has any queries or additional questions, please get in touch with us via the Shoosmiths website or on email, and thank you very much for joining us today. See you both.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye, David.